Hello, everybody out there. Welcome to another Stories Inc. LinkedIn learning session. My name is Bernadette Van Giesen, and I'm your host. And we have a special treat today, his first time on LinkedIn Live, Scott Thompson, Stories Inc. partner and co-founder. Hey, Scott, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes, so glad to finally have you on, and I can't think of a better person to talk about this topic today, which is how to communicate core values. I like to think of Scott as kind of like the champion of core values within Stories Inc., both coming up with them, at the beginning and being a driving force of what our values are, but also helping us communicate them internally and really live them every day. So I'm so glad you're the person who's here to talk about this topic.
I'm excited for this. I think they're very important, and when done right, can be very powerful.
Yes, no, absolutely. So I think we can just get into our topic. So today we're going to be talking about how to communicate core values to accomplish your talent engagement goals. So both talking to candidates, but then also talking internally to the people within your organization. So Scott, I know this is a topic that's really important to you. Can you kind of help us take a step back, define, what are core values and why are they so important to an organization?
Well, people often think of, for example, a company's purpose or mission might be its why. Why does our company exist? I like to think of companies' core values as its who. Who are we? Or more specifically, what is it about us or the way we work or what we believe that will help us achieve that mission? And so if a company is living its values, those values should guide how business decisions are made and the day-to-day company culture employees experience, which would ultimately help drive toward an organization's mission and goals.
I like the kind of like connecting and also differentiating between values and mission. So it's like mission is kind of like where you're trying to go, and then core values is like how you're going to get there and kind of shape like the way that you're going to approach the work that you're doing.
Definitely. It's a helpful way to think about it.
Yeah. So as you kind of alluded to there, core values, they're really going to affect how you do your work, which really affects your culture. So like, how do you communicate with people? Like, how do you approach problems, which of course would also affect how you hire and engage with people on a daily basis. So for all of our employer brand, recruitment marketing, talent acquisition folks out there, core values, I'm sure, are really a big part, whether intentionally or unintentionally, with how you approach your job every day. Which kind of brings me to kind of getting to our topic about communicating core values. A really interesting study that Qualtrics put out last year, and we'll link to it in the comments here, but they surveyed United States employees, and 54% said that they'd be willing to take a pay cut to work at a company with better values. And then even more than that number, 56% said they would not even consider a job at a company that has values that they disagree with, which I don't think we always think about values as being some of those top decision-making things when people are choosing a job, but I just thought those statistics were really interesting. Scott, I don't know what they mean to you.
Yeah, I just think with different technology and different channels out there right now, there's so much great information that can be gathered about the organizations people are considering working at. And so as they narrow down the list of the companies that feel like would be a great opportunity for them, core values really can jump out as a way to build a connection with those candidates, or for those candidates to feel a connection with the company. If they have shared values, going back to that, that framework of values being, what is it about us? What do we believe in that will help us get to our mission or achieve our mission? If a candidate is looking at organizations out there, using core values as a criteria for them will really help show them, where can I contribute? Where do our values align such that I can help a company achieve its mission?
Yeah, it's almost kind of like a filter, because I feel like when you work with people that your values align with, you can get work done faster in a more satisfying way. So it's kind of a filter of like, am I going to be able to be successful here and content here? Something that I also think is really interesting about these stats are that they speak to kind of like decision making, that it's not just a nice to have, but really it's a must have. And something that you alluded to there as well is I think more and more candidates are doing more research and more education when it comes to choosing the roles that they're applying to. So knowing that this is something that candidates want to know about your organization and they're actively researching it, which gets to the communication piece, which we're going to get into today.
Definitely. It's a great point, and something that we've thought about in the past is just, core values can be really helpful in that they help guide decisions. If you may come to a decision point and ask yourself, what would my decision be for this situation based on the core values? And when you have that as a guidepost for you, it helps with decision making.
Mm-hmm. So, and then we're going to get into our communication today. So as talent leaders, as culture communication leaders out there, communicating your core values is really critical to attracting and retaining that top talent in your organization. So we are going to get into, here at Stories Inc., we believe employee story content is the best way to do that because it is the proof of those values in action. So our first kind of lesson here, so to speak, is that you need to be walking your talk. So of course, we always say we're not culture doctors. If you're not doing this, you're not doing this. But like assuming that you are living your values and you are, they do exist in your organization, finding those stories and putting them out there to people and saying like, these are what our values actually look like on a day-to-day basis. So Scott, can you kind of tell us a little bit more about this and kind of the importance of walking your talk in your culture content? I
can, yes. Core values are very common with companies. Almost every company, especially bigger companies, have them. They're very public. They are sometimes posted on the walls, but that can still be a pretty lofty concept. Here's just like this word that we believe in. I think of it as being just like a 30,000 foot concept. It's just this word that we might believe in or view ourselves as. So it's important that we do walk the talk, and that helps kind of bring a tangible quality to those core values. And employee stories is how we get there. Employee stories show what values look like in action. They're the proof that you are who you say you are.
Yes, absolutely. And kind of to your point there, core values, they also help your culture stand out. And this is not a bad thing, but a lot of companies have the same values. Like I think if you were to look at a lot of technology companies or a lot of companies that are building things, I'm sure innovation finds a way into their core values somehow, which is very important to their success. It makes sense that it's there. But when especially if someone is searching for a job within a similar industry, it's like to see those values plastered across 5-6 different organizations. It's like, okay, what does that even mean? What does innovation mean here? So it's like by actually telling stories that bring these values to life, it also helps distinguish your culture from the competition. And then it really builds that trust with candidates too, of like, okay, so like they say they're innovative, but like now I know how they're innovative and how does that work for me?
And there's also the really, at this point, old example, but pretty popular. And I bring up this example a lot. Lauren has probably heard me say it dozens of times, but Enron had integrity as a core value.
Oh my gosh, I did not know that.
And so it's just, it's meaningless if it's just a word on a wall and there's no stories to back up what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. So we do have a story for you all out there to show this in action. So this one is from the organization Ochsner. So they are hospitals based in Louisiana. And this is a really great example of their core value, teamwork.
We had this infant who was unfortunately diagnosed with cancer, and it wasn't a good prognosis, but what I witnessed was just a beautiful outpouring of love from everyone involved. Our team advocated to help this family let their daughter see sunshine one more time and feel the grass between her toes. So we have this wonderful balcony off of our unit, and we arranged everything. We put her in a little wagon, all attached to her ventilator and to all of her support, and it took nursing, physicians, our wonderful child life therapist, everybody, and we were able to bring her out there and her family and let them have that moment. I was humbled to watch this family be so strong with their daughter's last few days. We're relentless in providing the absolute best for our patients. We're going to make these messy things okay and better for very difficult situations.
Always a really beautiful story.
Really beautiful. And just, yeah, I mean, first of all, our healthcare workers are just incredible. I'm just so inspired every time I speak to them. But it's a case where, you know, a nurse may get a ton of rewarding work no matter where they are, but this is a case where teamwork came into play. So it speaks to the teamwork at Ochsner, especially within that unit, on how different departments, you know, came together to create a really special moment. That might not necessarily happen at every hospital. Despite, you know, the work might be rewarding at every hospital, but it may not have that component of teamwork at every hospital, and that'll resonate with nurses.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also, like, to create a moment like that, it took so many people coming together, and different organizations, maybe there isn't the bandwidth, or there's not the type of people there, or there's not kind of the infrastructure in place to allow those things to happen. So just knowing that there is, teamwork that exists, and a really great example. And something else I really love about this video is, I always kind of like to think about like story arcs as you think about like, how do you uncover these stories, and then how do you kind of put them together? And this story from Ochsner does a really good job of connecting that core value to that mission that they have. And their mission is patient care and serving their patients. And so this storyteller in this instance did a really great job of connecting that story to the end goal of, because of teamwork, we were able to make a difficult situation a little bit easier for that patient's family. So I think that's another reason why that story is so great.
I agree. It's a great example.
So that is an example of, finding stories from your employees that really show your culture on a day-to-day, that bring those core values to life. But that's not the only type of stories you can tell that kind of walk your talk. So Scott, is there another type of story that you think it's important that organizations are sharing?
Definitely. Talking about stories where it's showing that leadership exudes those values or lives those values, and the importance of values coming from the top down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we think about core values too, with kind of the goal of building trust and communicating, I think it's just extra powerful when you hear that leaders are thinking about these values and actively living them as well. So I think that's super, super important. And to do that, we have an example from Sunoco. Sunoco is a packaging company, and here is a really great story from one of their storytellers, Rebecca.
We had a Sunoco Young Professional Group put on a developing event where we had an executive panel come in, and we had all of our young professionals in attendance. And Rob Teedy, who's now our CEO, actually came up to us afterwards and said, let's reverse this. Let's have a panel of young professionals, and let's have all of our executive team come in and ask you questions, like what can we do better as a company? And so we did that, and I just think that in and of itself just speaks volumes for the type of company that this is.
Forgot to say up top, the value that this brings to life is their respect value, which is a great core value to have. And I think this video shows that really well, because, it's that leader respecting the perspective of early career professionals and saying like, hey, like, we're not the only ones who have knowledge here. Like, we want to hear from you too. And I think just like the respect just exudes from that story.
Yeah, I really love that story. First of all, it's a great leadership lesson for me, or for anyone watching, is just, how can we, turn the table where the team members that may be working in different parts of the organization, they're going to have so many different great experiences and perspectives on particular issues. So let's turn the tables. Let's ask them, what can we do better? And so I love that story. And it's a great example of, showing the way the leadership is at an organization, and how they live the values.
Mhm. I think another lesson from this video, as you think about telling core value stories in your own organization, is it doesn't always have to be the storyteller talking about themselves, which it's great to uncover those stories. I do think sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want to like brag about myself, about the great things that I'm doing, that it's still, you can find a really great story from asking, like, when is a time that you have seen respect, shown in your organization? So asking them to talk about someone else. And those stories are equally as powerful. And then they're also kind of a nice hat tip to the person who it is about, that their behavior is recognized.
It's a really nice thing to see when you see, someone recognizing the behaviors of someone else that is living the values. And we're going to get into this, but it creates a really great virtuous cycle, as we'll talk about.
Yeah. Well, that's a really great segue. So those kind of two examples there. So talking about walking your talk as you communicate your values. So finding examples of core values in action. And in this case, and I think we're going to have a little bit of a candidate focus there, but if you share that externally, candidates who are considering your organization really can see what you mean by your values. They understand your culture better. They build that trust, which all are really great steps to building those relationships with candidates. But we know that core values are also extremely effective when shared internally. And I know, Scott, you're particularly kind of passionate about this topic as a leader at Stories Inc.
It's really cool to see when it's working. And we talk about this. I mentioned a virtuous cycle. If you're able to share or feature stories internally about someone that is living a core value, a lot of things are happening, which is pretty exciting. First of all, you're recognizing the employee, you're featuring them and celebrating wherever it is that you're able to share that. Maybe it's something that they did. They completed a major project, or in this case, lived a core value. But by memorializing that story of what they did and getting it out there and sharing it, you're setting it as an example. And it creates this flywheel that I kind of touched on. It's where the thing happened that the person did. It's documented in a story. It's shared so that other team members are able to see that story, and they really connect with that story because they see that value being lived. And it's a great example for them to show them what it means to live that value. And then those people who consumed that story are then more likely to do the things that live the values of the organization, which in turn creates more fuel for opportunities to document great stories and then to share those stories, and the cycle continues.
On and on. Yes. No, I love that. And just to kind of like put an example to that, if you think of that Ochsner video that we saw earlier, maybe someone in that organization, maybe they're at a different Ochsner Health Center location or something like that. They don't even know this team, and they hear that and they're like, oh, I didn't even realize I could do something like that. Like, I didn't know that I could work with cross teams to be able to create this really special moment for someone. And so it's like an idea of a way that you can like, oh, I can do that too, which then just creates really positive moments throughout the organization.
Exactly. Similarly with the Sunoco video, maybe there's a manager level individual in a different location that watched that story and then realized, they actually have the agency to, apply some respect to the people that report to them and do something out of the ordinary.
Mm-hmm. For our next example, I think kind of like an extra tip there is knowing that content that you're sharing externally to candidates also doubles internally. So kind of what we just said right there, like those two first videos we shared, they maybe were created with candidates and recruit marketing and employer brand in mind, but they work really effectively when shared internally as well. That maybe you just have to update the way that you're sharing it, the context of it a little bit. You're going to speak differently to employees than you are to candidates, but that content really doubles and can be repurposed both ways. So we're going to share a third example here. Again, this is a core value video that could be shared externally, but also really effective internally. It's from Lowe's Hotels. They're a hospitality organization, and this short story brings their professionalism value to life.
I'm going to be transitioning into a server position and asking them how do I learn about this stuff? The manager pulled me inside and had like 10 different wines. He's like, here you go. Try this one, tell me what you think, and we'd have a conversation about it. They really give you the opportunity to learn here, and they teach you and answer your questions. I felt like a human being and not just a worker.
So really short, quick story, but Lowe's professionalism value is about people feeling pride in their work and the ability to do their best work for their guests. And I think that video does a good job of sharing that.
Yeah, it's a great example of bringing, the training and empowerment that goes into this value of professionalism to life. And you could see if, as this video circulated internally within Lowe's, you could see it having positive ripple effects with just team members being encouraged to ask questions, raising their hand to level up their skills, get some training, and try some new, whether it's becoming a server if they hadn't before or otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so as we think about kind of that internal ripple effect, what are some ways that you can amplify these stories internally? So like, where are some places you can share it? Where are kind of just like different ways that you can get these stories out as much as possible?
I mean, the beauty about documenting these stories in a shareable, digestible format, like videos, we're biased, but we think video is a great format for getting these stories out, is that they can just be shared through so many different channels that you may have internally. Here at Stories Inc., we have a Slack channel called Core Values, and it's an opportunity or a forum for team members to share examples of their team members living our core values. So if someone sees someone who's, supported a client in a particular way that really embodies one of our values, they're able to drop it into that Core Values Slack channel. And, that's a great opportunity to source examples of people living our values to then, document them down the road, shareable, digestible format. You can be intentional with employee spaces. Lowe's hotels, for example, their break rooms are really decked out in core values material. And so that's a great opportunity to, share these stories of people living values. And then any other channels that you may be using internally, whether it's an intranet, a newsletter, internal newsletter, company, intranet blogs, finding ways to celebrate employees living your values in those communications is just, it's a natural place for them and a great way to get the word out about people living the value.
I can't remember who the organization was, but I remember hearing somewhere that whenever there's a leadership meeting, at the top of the call, like everyone goes around and recognizes someone on their team who exuded a core value or just really lived out the company's culture. And it's just kind of like fitting some of those things into existing workflows you have, whether it's a monthly email or a Slack channel or something like that. You can just like find spots to amplify your values. And the more you talk about them, the more they're top of mind for people. So I think those are great tips. And an example and something that I see organizations do that I love is core value awards. So whether it's kind of informal, like employee of the month, maybe featured in your break room, or more formal end of year core value awards where you're creating an event and amplifying it throughout your organization. I think it's just like a really great area to be able to bring those core values to life and share them internally. And I know we've been able to do that. We've worked with one client over the last 3 years to do that, and kind of every year it just keeps getting better of like more creative ways to have managers and leaders recognizing people living their values every day. It's just a really fun opportunity to amplify that.
I love core values awards programs. In fact, we implemented one this year. So we'll be having our first award ceremony at the end of this year for people who have done something that has really lived our core values in a special way. I just love that it's a great opportunity for recognizing people, but it also, and this is a good segue into what we're going to talk about next, but it's a great way to surface these stories when team members are nominating each other for living the core values. It's a great way to surface stories that can then be packaged up and documented in a shareable way.
Yeah, it's a great point, because I think a question we get a lot from people are, how do I pick storytellers? How do I identify them? There's a lot of ways to do that. One would be through something like this, that if you're seeing someone getting nominated for a core value award, it's like, okay, they embody our culture. They are someone we likely want more of. That I think that's a good avenue to select people to interview. Which kind of leads us to our final topic. We always like to be actionable in these sessions, so hopefully you all can leave and do this work yourselves. But tips for finding core value stories in your organization. So I know we kind of shared a little bit throughout, but if there's just a couple tips, Scott, you have to share of how, when people are interviewing employees or just kind of looking for areas around their organization, how can you find these stories?
Great. Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that at Stories, we have a core values Slack channel. If you don't have one already, that sort of forum or venue for these sorts of conversations is great. It could also be even a submission box, even a physical or a virtual web-based form entry. But getting people to recognize each other as they see their colleagues living core values. If you're preparing for an employee storytelling interview, you could add a core values question to the questions that you plan on sharing in advance with the individual that you're going to speak with. So you're kind of jogging their memory, getting them in the core values story mindset. That's a good opportunity. And then if you are conducting an employee storytelling conversation, keep the core values in the back of your mind and watch out for opportunities that present themselves where you could dig a little deeper if you spot your storyteller hinting that there's a core values story there. You want to catch those organically, because those are great when they come up, because for all the reasons we mentioned, they can be just used and repurposed in so many ways.
Yeah, I really like that last tip. And it's why we stand by kind of the facilitated interview approach when uncovering stories, because if you kind of know what to look for, then you can ask those follow-up questions. You as the interviewer can kind of connect it back to values. Because sometimes people aren't always thinking with the core value name on it, but it's like they still exist in the culture and how people treat each other every day. So even when they're just telling a story, you're like, oh, that sounds like respect, would that be an example of that you can kind of tie it back?
And the great thing about, once you create these habits within the organization of sharing stories of team members living the core values, it's, for the reasons we mentioned before, it becomes a virtuous cycle. It just becomes more common, more part of the culture, where A, people are living the values more, B, people are talking about the values more because they're documenting the things that their colleagues are doing to live the values, and then that cycle just continues.
Awesome. Honestly, I can't think of a better way to sum it up. Scott, thanks for being here and dropping your core value wisdom on us. Really appreciate it. If anyone out there has any questions about how to communicate core values or what it would be like to partner on a project with Stories Inc., please get in touch. Visit us on our website or message us on LinkedIn. We're here. Okay, thanks, Scott.
Thank you. This was fun.
Bye, everybody.